from TrendLab, from Telefónica Guaira. They are doing open innovation from a corporation for a public corporation. So it's also a great view, the one she has in this space. So we all know here that as we have learned and listened, I mean, working with the public sector is not easy. The public client sometimes can be a risky business. So why you are here? Why you are still convinced that this is a market with a lot of potential, as Jesus explained it to us? And actually, after telling us that vision, I would like to know what's your specific role in this Govtech ecosystem, right? So please, Carlos, if you want to start.
Yeah, no, and thank you also for the invitation to be part of this discussion here. We are also delighted from the Development Bank of Latin America to have been signing an agreement yesterday with the Instituto de Empresa to see how we can collaborate in this space, and we're looking forward to find these spaces of collaborations. I think your question is very important because it's also why one of the reasons like the international financial institution like ours is in this field. And I think the main reason here is that we have a market failure. We have a market failure because there's a mismatch between, on the one hand, governments that want to innovate because there's an imperative to innovate. And actually, you know, I think there's also a change in generations in public servants of a younger generation that also wants to innovate, but cannot find the ways to procure that innovation. On the other hand, we've seen a lot of examples just right now. You have a lot of supply of innovation from the startup community that is ready to go in terms of providing solutions that are fit for purpose for governments. And then we also have the investors that don't really dare to invest in these startups because they are doing business with governments, and we all know how difficult it is to do business with governments, and therefore it doesn't pay. So the way we see it is it's a market failure or a state failure where you have a demand for innovation from the public sector, a supply from new digital solutions from the private sector, and investors that are maybe not like super excited yet to jump into this thing. So therefore, institutions like ours, we try to address these market failures to improve the quality of government, the quality of services, and the quality of life of citizens in a lot of our countries. And the way we do it is maybe in different ways. The first one is really, and a lot of us around this, in this podium are contributing to that, is generating more knowledge and also generating more evidence of that these solutions actually work and they provide value for money to governments that want to spend in smarter ways. Second, we also provide advocacy and working with governments that want to see how we can make things better. And we're also very happy to work with the government of Colombia, helping them to think through their innovation ecosystems and what are the policy levers that governments can activate, such as public procurement for innovation that was mentioned previously. And also as a bank, we're also trying to become what we call a patient investor in this market. So these are the three ways we try to contribute to this, like promoting knowledge and evidence of what works, working with governments that want to make their ecosystems more agile, and also trying to invest in this space.
Well, that's a lot. And that's why we are partnering with you, by the way.
That's right.
Yeah. So, Justina, what about you? I mean, what's your role? I mean, we know you are coming from the government. Actually, you're advisor to the Prime Minister in Poland. Yeah. So it's quite a thing, right? That it is Govtech agenda.
I am heading the Govtech program. Okay. But before I used to be the formal advisor. Now it's like I am talking to Prime Minister when it comes to Govtech, because it was his idea in Poland to open public procurement, because when we are talking about venture capital funds, then we think, okay, there are money from United States. No, not money in our country, for sure. But it's not true, because, for example, in Poland, public procurement money is 50 billion euros. So it's a lot of money. And what we are doing as a Govtech, what is my role, is to promote that it is possible to redirect those money into startups from huge corporations. How? we have found that there is a law in Public Procurement Directive, European Public Procurement Directive, that enables to win the public contract by startups. And it was very interesting because it wasn't so popular in Europe, because I think it was already present from 2004 in the directive, but it was the stereotype about this clause that it is for architecture, not for software or any technologies. But what we did in Poland, we have proved that it is very good clause to also for startups and for high technologies. And before it was 0.08% of whole public tenders constituted those contest design, because I am talking about contest design. But now it's like we have, just after a year, we have reached 5%. So it's like we have managed to show that this clause is attractive both for public sector and for startups. And when you get rid of all the barriers for the startups, so there are no prerequisites, no formalities, only ideas and skills matter, then you can really attract plenty offers as a public sector, because we have reached 22 times more offers than in normal tender. So it's extremely competitive, and it is good because everyone can show that he can deliver to the public sector.
No, actually, that's super interesting. I would like to follow on your comment afterwards. Mark, what about you?
So firstly, why I'm excited about this market. As you said, there is a market failure. I would say the only way in which governments can both save money and improve the way they operate and improve public services is by working with better technology, and often with younger technology companies. I see that as something that's very, very important, and that's one of the main reasons why I work where I work, and I find it super exciting. But also from the startup side, I often hear, I don't want to engage in this market, it's going to be too hard, I'm not sure who to speak to, I don't know how procurement works. But for startups, there are definitely ways and increasing ways to get in, some of the work you're doing and in other places. Once you're in, it can be both very lucrative and very sticky, but also everything that you do is going to have a very, very strong impact. If you're doing something to improve efficiencies inside government, that's going to save the taxpayer money. If you're improving a public service, a citizen service, that's going to impact upon people's lives. So for me, this is one of the most exciting markets. And I guess the final thing is that government and public sector touch almost everything, right? There's health, there's education, there's local government citizen engagement, there's sustainability, and there is so many cool opportunities for startups and new technologies to make that impact. And in terms of our role, I work for a company called Public. We try to bring both governments and startups together to enable some of this change. We accelerate startups, running programs to, equip them with the skills, the networks to succeed and get traction in this market. We also build our own companies, so when we see a market gap, we can build and spin our own companies. We also do a lot of what we consider to be convening the market, through things like running a Govtech conference in Paris to having just opened a co-working space in Westminster in the centre of UK government.
Actually, November 14th, right?
November 14th, yes.
I mean, if you're interested, no, of course, if you're interested in this Govtech ecosystem space, you should be in Paris with Public and most of us, actually.
Shout if you'd like details.
Another thing, you are already in Germany, France, Denmark, and UK, right?
UK.
I'm not missing anything. So again, this is a reality. We are not inventing anything here, maybe a little bit new in Spain, but actually there is people doing these kind of things here, right, Ines? She is coming from Guaira, working in Trend Lab with Renfe.
Yes. So Trend Lab is the startups accelerator of Renfe, jointly with Guaira. When we started this project 1 year ago, actually, we launched here at South Summit. We had a clear vision that we wanted to transform and give value to Renfe. For those of you that don't know, Renfe is the Spanish railway company, a public company. And so it was quite a challenge to create a startups accelerator for the Spanish environment and try to give as a value proposition to the startups the access to the business development of the startups with the business units of Renfe. So our objective is to make sure that we can provide jointly solutions jointly with Renfe, and especially internally as well in the business units of Renfe. So my role here is basically being in the bridge, because I'm coming from Wire. Wire, as you know, is the micro-corporate venture capital of Telefónica. So I know both sides, the private and the public side. So I know a lot of things that occur in the private sector that have the same impact in the public sector in a different way. So my view here is to try to give this bridge and mindset on this perspective.
Thank you so much. Actually, CAF is conducting a good amount of research on this space in Govtech, and it seems that the main two barriers for Govtech startups to work with governments are procurement, that Justina, you said before, and investment. So again, I want to follow up a little bit in the experience that you're having with Poland. I mean, you're saying there are regulations that allow working with the startups. The problem is the implementation of those regulations. So I would say that how you started to change the narrative in your government, in your institution, in the government, right? Because this first step, who was the leader changing this? Yeah. Can you explain us a little bit shortly, because we don't have too much time, but
sure.
How was the process to come from a framework no possible to work with a startup to start procurement with the startups as you are doing right now?
We have started in 2017, but not thinking about Govtech back then. We have presented as a Ministry of Finance the challenge during hackathon, the biggest hackathon in Europe. That takes place in Poland, in Warsaw. And after that hackathon, it turned out that during 24 hours, programmers can show that they can deliver so great results. And after that hackathon, we got the solution as a Ministry of Finance that there was a drop of tax frauds in the internet by 80%. Just after 24 hours, the solution presented during that time. So we started thinking, okay, so if they can do that only for 24 hours. So what they can do if we give them more time and not we require to be in the place. They can be maybe virtually somewhere and not in the same place. And we have opened the public procurement law and started reading. And in turn we found this law and we spent half a year in the public procurement office. So you asked me on what level was that? So it was at the highest level. Successfully, my previous boss was promoted from vice prime minister to prime minister. So my program moved to chancellery of the prime minister, and it was a pure of luck, because he's very in promoting technology and he's believing in young, talented people, and it was my job to bring them on board. But we cannot bring them on board, all of them on salaries, but we can bring them on board, and this bridge can be a public procurement office. So what we are doing, we have published good practices by our public procurement office. So we show the public institutions that really, it's safe. They say it's safe, so it's safe. And when it comes to startups, they cannot see that because they see, we call it digital by desire, not by default, because I know in the United Kingdom it's default, it's by desire. So we desired that this whole procedure, this contest is online. So we have the contest platform and they cannot see all the struggles because it's easy peasy.
Wow, super interesting. So, Carlos, CAF, I would say that it's the biggest promoter of Govtech ecosystems in Latin America, as far as I know. You've been working in this agenda for a year now. you've seen that, based on the conversation that we have had, that the pieces for these Govtech ecosystems exist in the countries in Latin America, and you work as well Portugal and Spain, but you have to articulate them, or you have to structure the ecosystems, right? For that, you need policies. What kind of policies would you suggest? Besides the procurement process that we see that it's a big piece of this thing, what would you suggest in terms of policies?
No, I like very much the concept of Justina of digital by desire. I think in this space, what there needs to be is more dialogue as well. I mean, more spaces for the public sector and the startup community to meet. And I think there's a lot of things. In the public sector, we always say, we cannot do these things because it's so difficult. We can't do this. We cannot do. We can't. I think we can do a lot of things if we want, by desire, by design, by default, and everything. And what we see in a lot of Latin American countries is that I think the legislation, there are things that can be tweaked, but the instruments are there, and I think you need to exploit them with maybe a desire and ambition to make it work and to make it more flexible. And a lot of countries are also working on a set of legislations that are important, especially that was mentioned in Spain, the startup law, for startups to be able to operate in a way that provides like fiscal incentives, for example. For the Govtech community in particular, I think the public procurement issue is the main, is the main issue there. But there are ways around it, and there are ways to make it work. We see that in Galicia, in Spain, in one of the regions where we can do that. I think the second thing that you also need is like actually a strategy with actually political goals that you want to set up for yourself as a government in this space. And when you look at the experience of the UK, for example, it's very interesting because they combine the political will to make it work with setting targets, especially for the public procurement of technology in government, that this needs to be diversified. And I think there's a lot of things that we can do as an institution also promoting knowledge. It's really like to invest in research in the sense of evaluations of impact, that this is actually providing good value for money. Public procurement of technology in government is around $400 billion per year now, and is set to increase to $1 trillion by 2025. This is a huge market, and I think this is a huge space for the startup community to think about it, because that's probably the space that has more potential to grow. But at the same time, governments need to be much smarter at procuring and buying technology. Governments are buying any kind of technologies. And one of the things maybe I want to just like to close here is that when we think about Govtech, we're not talking about big tech. I mean, what I'm saying is that we're not talking about big tech in terms of big technologies and big information systems for governments. Mm-hmm. This is a different set of issues, and Govtech is small tech in the sense of incubating innovation in the public sector. So by using data and new technologies, you can make more. You can get better value for money from the big tech. And I think one of the big challenges we're going to face in Latin America in other way is that we invested in big tech in the 90s, like information management system for HR, for budgeting, for all kinds of things. All these legacy systems are coming to to end of their cycle, and there's going to be a lot of governments that will need to renew their big legacy systems as well. So I think one of the things here is that, to conclude again by Justina's point, is that, digital by desire really requires more dialogue, more spaces where public sector and the startup community can exchange, experiment, and talk.
Jumping on that very quickly, I completely agree with you, and having that level of collaboration and I guess education from both sides is super important. I would love to see schemes where government employees get seconded to startups so that they can share their institutional knowledge inside and get to know what being inside a small company is and bring that back in. I think that will go a long way.
It's also, you need to remember that there are all of us, our data there. Mm. So it's like, it's a trade-off. And for example, in our contest, the people who are showing their results, they are anonymous. So it is also like there is and after it turned out that it is he was the best, but they didn't know that it was a startup. So when it comes to we are not thinking, because contest design in Poland is open for everyone. They are presenting anonymously. But it turned out, but even though there were 5 top huge tech companies were participating in our competitions, but all of the competitions are won by SMEs, startups. So it's like all about both mutual trust.
Absolutely, and we always like to stress, I mean, this is a big market. There is a space for everyone here.
Yes.
So, I mean, we are seeing that now there are some startups competing with big companies, but also many startups complementing or collaborating with big companies. Actually, there is that's a nice way to go to procurement processes, a bigger procurement processes. We also like to stress that when you, as a government, start working with the startups, it's not just that you are attracting new technology, it's also that you are having your vendor marketplace more diversified and more competitive. So I mean, I think that there are many good things of working with the startups besides technology. And actually, Mark, I mean, I guess that you work with the startups the whole day. I mean, startups that are working with government. So I guess that I can imagine your conversations with the startups like tired, trying. I mean, which are the 3 pieces of advice that you give to a startup when starting to work with governments?
So I think in one respect, government sales is like any other sales in that you need to have very, very good relationships. You need to have presence at events. You need to make yourself known. So, I mean, number 1 is absolutely do that. And I guess the places in which you go and do that and the methods in which you do that are perhaps slightly different from the private sector, but it's the same, you know, it's the same thing to go and do. The second thing I would say is that to build a public sector business case, if you can prove that you both save money and align with policy outcomes, and you can do both of those things, you are going to be in a very, very good position. So articulate your story in such a way that, you know, brings across both of those things. And the third thing I will say is that have a level of sensitivity that you're asking for public money, right? You know, I often hear from startups, my technology is great, it would make such a difference, why doesn't it get in? You know, asking for public money does have more sensitivity to it than asking for private sector money, and so have that in your head and be sensitive to the ways in which public officials are going to make decisions and look to spend that money.
So now the other way around.
Yeah.
3 pieces of advice for governments that want to start working with the startups?
Sure. So I think the first thing would be, we hear a lot from governments that they want to build their own things because there's nothing in the market, because the needs that we have are perhaps slightly different from things that are going to be out there. In some cases, that's going to be true, but in many cases, there is likely to be a great tech company, a great startup that can solve those problems. So the first thing that I would say is have the ability to look deeper in the market than you are currently doing, and look to the markets before looking to buy, because it's likely going to be cheaper. I think the second thing that I would say is that there are increasingly great examples of things that are happening inside governments, whether it be inside their own country or internationally. And so, you know, I think look to where other things have worked. Of course, if you're a public official, having a great government use case, public sector use case is going to make a big difference if you want to buy from that particular company. But I don't think that necessarily all of those things are known. So make sure doing the research in that way, I think, can go a long way. And I think also the third thing would be, it's the same advice that I gave on the other side, right? Have some sensitivity to the fact that startups are coming from a very different standpoint to larger companies. In terms of getting deals done quicker for a startup could be the difference between life and death, depending on their runway. And so, yeah, put yourself in the other side's shoes.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Ines, you've been working with the public sector with Renfe, part of a public corporation.
Yes.
But before, you are coming from Guaira. I mean, you are experts in open innovation. What kind of insights or what have you taken from the private sector and now applying in a corporation like Renfe?
That's a good question. In Guaira, we were very expert in terms of cooperating with the startups. We started this journey in 2011. So I think that trust that Wara gave to Renfe was very important to start this journey together. So I think it's important when we do open innovation to look for two main topics. First one, the pain points of your business units, and to have everything under control and have constant relationship with the different business units of your company. And second one, have like a kind of a key account manager for the startup. So someone who is on behalf of the startup, that is like the bridge between the business units and the startup. That they can translate the kind of, communication and language that they have. Especially because working with a corporate, it means that the processes are going to be very, they are going to be very slow. You are going to find a lot of bureaucracy, and you need to have someone that speaks the same language. So in the public sector, or what we have learned in the private sector at Wara, is that we have implemented some methodologies that implemented more agile ways of working. So for example, the startups that are invested by Telefónica, they have a fast track for the procurement process. Or the payment, the cycles of payment are different if they work already with Telefónica. But this kind of measures, it's very difficult to implement in a public company where you have such a regulation in the nation. So I think it's very important to look for the regulation that is right now in the Spanish ecosystem, and to think about more agile regulation so the public companies can hire easily the startups. Because right now what they can do is that they can contract directly if the budget is less than 15,000 euros. But if it's more than that, they need to go for a public contest. And normally a startup can't go by themselves to a public contest. So it's very important to have more agile methodologies in this kind of procurement in terms of the business development. So I think these are the main key points of trying to work with a public company and a startup.
Oh, very, very interesting. Actually, we are launching our first Open Innovation Govtech program for cities and regions here in Spain. And something that we stress is the training. We feel that we have to accelerate people from the public institutions, but we need to de-accelerate startups, right? It's not the same pitching to an investor or pitching to a mayor, right? Sometimes it's not very clear who is the one who you have to talk to buy this. There is a strategy as well to, as you said, Mark, when you are leading with the public sector. So training is important. Well, and to finish this, we have 2 minutes. So we have here a lot of people from the public institutions. I want you to help me to convince these people that Govtech is a reality, and that there are a lot of advantages besides risk to when working with the startups. So we don't have 2 minutes. One phrase for each one.
Yeah, one phrase. I would say that, coming from a bank, the time to invest in Govtech is now. This is coming fast, and I think it's now to invest, time to invest in Govtech now for governments and for investors. For governments, because innovation is an imperative, and it's a global marketplace, and countries are positioning themselves to attract this market very fast. And we see your neighbor here, France, is very aggressive, and to put the state in a startup mode. It's quite also interesting also for governments, and we'll see that also with the Basque Country and others. This is very local, and local government cities are going very fast. And I was wondering why, and I think because the relationship with the citizen is direct. So I think that this issue is there. A second reason to invest in Govtech now is that governments need to be much smarter at buying technology. We cannot keep on buying this technology that fails. And not only, we're not talking about countries in Latin America only. The United States in 2014-15 with the social security system that failed. So governments need to be much smarter at buying technology. And then, investors are looking for opportunities to invest in the startup space and need to look at the Govtech space because, the market is huge. And I think there's a lot of countries that are trying to, make Govtech programs and Govtech challenge that are showing that it can work. And there's already some exits in the investors that have invested in Govtech a couple of years ago. And it's not, it does provide social value and social impact and so on, but also financial returns. And the first exits are quite promising in that space.
Carlos, you got 1 minute.
Sorry.
One phrase.
Next time.
One phrase, yeah, sorry, it was like 3.
Okay, I would try to be quicker. Okay, so I liked what you, Carlos, said, that Govtech is not necessarily big technology. It can be anything that helps to work for the public sector in an agile methodology. So if we if the public servant supports other public servants to reduce redundancy, it's a Govtech. If even he can upload faster or even have a faster website, also, it is a Govtech. Anything that brings the public sector closer to the private sector and closer to the business methodology, agile in an agile style, it is a Govtech. And to call to action for public servants that are here, in Poland we have between 2.5 million and 4 million entrepreneurs. So there are up to 4 million creative, smart ideas.
Mark?
I will be very, very quick. As I said at the start, I think the only way to both save money and improve public services and improve the way the government runs and operates is by working with new technologies and cheaper technologies and more scalable technologies. And there are governments everywhere that are trying to do that, and so I would encourage those to try. And then the other thing that I hear from public officials is that working with startups is too risky. There are now a ton of examples of those sorts of collaborations that have worked. And so I would encourage one to look at that risk in a slightly different way. And I can provide examples.
Thank you. And finally, Ines?
The way I should convince you that public administrations and government is already doing something around this is that TrendLab is already a reality. So a public company has already a startups accelerator. So we are looking for the best startups in mobility, transport, and logistics to apply and to transform Renfe. So if you have a startup, if you are a startup tomorrow, we will open our call.
Thank you so much. This has been great. Thank you so much for sharing with us your vision and insights in this space on Govtech. And thank you. I guess that's un gran aplauso.